Welcome to Marine Tech Talk, a podcast about how Teledyne Marine's innovative technologies are enabling scientific discoveries and commercial tasks in the world's oceans and waterways. On this episode, we'll be speaking with Captain Richard Riels, the founder and director of the Sea Mammal Education Learning Technology Society, or SMELTS. Richard's passion for marine mammals, and in particular the negative events associated with entanglement by fishing gear, have led to his innovative lineless lobster traps, which incorporate Teledyne Benthos acoustic communication equipment. You'll hear Richard explain his technology, his vision, and the hurdles that must be overcome in order to replace a 200-year-old method of fishing with his ropeless technology, and how it could benefit both marine mammals and the fishing industry. Here's Captain Richard Riels with the host of Marine Tech Talk, Melissa Rossi.
Richard, I know that you have developed this organization to solve a number of issues, entanglements, marine entanglements, marine debris, and ghost fishing issues. You've been working with Benthos for a while to create some special products. I'd like to find out first how you got started in all of this. What made you found this society, and what are you doing with it?
Well, since I was a child, I've seen literally thousands of whales since I was a kid. It's kind of my hobby to see whales in their marine environment, and discovering and learning more about their plights in modern time, ship strike, entanglement, climatology, the changes of basically their prey sources, moving into areas that have brought them into much more danger. Areas that we thought that they were safe have brought them into more exposed areas, more industrialized areas. And training myself to disentangle large whales and working with large disentanglement networks and large whale stranding networks, I started discovering that it was a great story for sure to rescue one animal, but in the long term, prevention was going to be the only thing that would give these animals a chance to truly survive into the future. So as being an engineer, I thought maybe I could figure out a way. So I went about my way trying to discover a truly new technology that could help save these animals. And it's really not a mitigated fishing device. It's really a new methodology for fishing to track the gear, being completely ropeless, to reduce marine debris, have the gear be able to be discovered by the fishermen. Even if we kind of lose it, we're trying to prevent that. And definitely end ghost fishing, which is becoming another huge concern to our society. Trap-based fisheries can continue to fish for years, and we would like to end that and truly give the fisherman his livelihood and stop losing all that gear. We're basically turning the ocean into a dump.
I read something, I think earlier this year, the state of Maine, the fishermen up in Maine have agreed to, over the next several years, reduce their lines that they're putting out by 50%. Massachusetts and New Hampshire have sort of a loose agreement at this point to reduce by 30%. And I know that one of the concerns for the fishermen, or I understand that the concerns for the fishermen now are they may be limited to the waters that they can fish in, and there's economic concerns, obviously. How will what you're doing address those issues?
That's a very tough question. Unfortunately, Maine has taken a much broader stance against the vertical line reduction rule. We are trying to talk with the fishermen and educate them about what basically SMELTS lift bag fishing technology really is, because I think a lot of fishermen don't understand the technology. They call it the unicorn in the room for sure. They don't believe it's real. I just came back from Maine and met with a bunch of great fishermen and really saw that they understood that this is very different, and it was something that they didn't know or understand. It's a real challenging problem because fisheries is the livelihood for a place like Maine. It's really one of their number one economy-based sources. To work with fishermen and give them a chance to continue to fish, especially if closures occur, which is really what National Marine Fisheries has basically, that's really all they have on their table right now. Either we come up with an innovative solution, which is ropeless, or we close fisheries. And unfortunately, If we don't continue to move forward with ropeless, fisheries closures are going to occur and fishermen are going to be locked out. So we're trying very hard to work with fishermen to understand that you could go fishing, whales could be present, you could use this new technology, we could all work together to try to come up with a broad-based solution and actually discover how feasible it really is. We haven't got there yet, so we're still in the discovery phase of how ropeless could actually work. And we're looking for good partner fishermen to do this. And Massachusetts is a unique area because Massachusetts is the closed area in our country. So because the right whales congregate so much there, in basically the end of winter, early spring, that fishery has been closed. So we're working very hard to work with National Marine Fisheries Service, NOAA, and partner fishermen to allow some small ropeless trial programs to begin in Massachusetts. Ropeless is illegal. That is one of the hugest hurdles that we have. It's a policy that's going to have to come all the way from the Department of Commerce to make a change. There is definitely possibilities for experimental fishing permits, but it is not a very easy platform at the moment because of the way that the rules and regulations for modern day fishing is basically determined.
Let me ask you a question. So let's back up just a little bit for people who may be unfamiliar with how lobster fishing occurs. How is it traditionally done now? So describe a traditional set of traps that go out.
There's two main bases of trap-based fisheries. One is called basically single pot fishing, and there's a vertical line and buoy that connects every single trap from the ocean floor to the sea surface. On that buoy is the fisherman's colors and permit number. That is how fisheries regulates the gear, knows which fisherman is actually there fishing. Trawl-based fishing is when we string 10, 20, 30, 40 pots together, and then on each end of the string line, we have a vertical line and buoy that marks the trawl. It gives the position of where the fishing gear is, and again, it allows the regulators to see who's fishing, what permit number is there, and it allows them to even haul the gear if they have questions on basically the regulations and the requirements that the fisheries is actually operating in. And that is where the difference between the ropeless and basically this old school way that's been done really for 2,000 years. We've hauled some kind of fishing trap from the bottom of the ocean with some kind of twine, hemp, rope, and it's a very traditional way to fish, and it's been very successful, but unfortunately it is entangling large whales, turtles, basking sharks, and a lot of other marine life end up getting themselves caught in this gear. And we're really working hard to try to eliminate that and still give the fishermen a way to go about their day.
So in your solution, then, there's no vertical line. That's my understanding. So how does your solution work?
Our system is completely line free. And basically what we've discovered is that lift bags that are used in the salvage industry are an incredibly powerful lifting force in the ocean. And there is really no commercial fishing gear that we can't bring up from the bottom of the ocean using this lift bag technology. The big challenge has been, how do we mark the gear? How do we regulate the gear? How do we let society know that there's gear in the water? How do fishermen not basically interact with each other in a negative way, which is basically overlay or stepping on each other? So that is where Teledyne benthos is so important. The marking technologies, the unique identifier numbers that each individual modem could do for the fishermen, how enforcement could actually see the gear and realize that is Tom out fishing today, as opposed to Rob. And if we need to bring the gear up, Teledyne's master deck control could deploy the gear, bring it up, the enforcement agents could look at the fisherman's gear, make sure that they're following regulations, and then redeploy the gear back in. We use high pressure gas, which is basically air compressed in scuba tanks. It's free. It's pretty inexpensive to operate and to basically use on a land-based system, or even a big ship could actually compress air and fill the tanks on board. The system is incredibly modular. It's from tiny little pony tanks that are 6 cubic feet that have about 250 pounds of lift, all the way up to these massive systems that we're building that could lift 20,000 pounds and fish in very deep water. And the acoustics from Teledyne benthos is so important for our recovery of the system, the marking of the system, and that's why we're so excited to partner with Teledyne to work these technologies and ultimately be able to demonstrate to National Marine Fisheries that Slocum gliders or Z-boats or other autonomous crafts could actually manage and monitor the system in place. So it could reduce carbon footprint, a lot less fuel use for vessels, real-time data, ultimately building underwater internet. We could produce these protocols for ship strike prevention because we could discover where whales are in real time. We could hear lots of things in the ocean. So the technology is very exciting, and we're really looking forward to getting this gear into the water and begin the tests.
So you mentioned a little bit earlier that there are some regulations that actually prevent ropeless fishing. What are those? Where are they? And I know that's a big question, but at least in the local New England area, what are the concerns about ropeless fishing?
Well, like I was saying earlier, the vertical line and buoy, and ultimately the buoy is the money ball. That is what a fisherman gets a permit number, pays National Marine Fisheries for his trap allotment for him to go fishing. And now if you remove that, you have to basically make a virtual marking system, a virtual buoy. And that is something that we're trying to demonstrate, we're trying to explain and educate, and that's where Teledyne's position and role is so important, because we can do this. The technology is available, and we can show that the gear could be marked, it could be seen by other fishermen. Maybe they don't know whose gear it is, but they know that there's gear underneath them. Don't lay your gear right here. Move up a little bit. And I think Massachusetts is a very unique place because it is 3,000 square miles of closed fisheries that a lot of fishermen relied on in the wintertime for very good lobster. If we could get some trial programs going and allow some basically small controlled areas that are very scrutinized and watched and studied to really begin the feasibility of ropeless, I think the laws and the possibilities would lessen and open. Doors would basically allow fishermen a chance. And I'm working on that right now with National Marine Fisheries. We're trying to figure out the best ways to do it. The Atlantic Large Whale Take Reduction Team basically, and you talked about this earlier, tried to figure out a way, how can we reduce vertical lines right now? And one of my suggestions is, let's remove a vertical line from a trawl and replace it with a ropeless technology. So now you've just removed 50% of all vertical lines, and you have a ropeless technology on the other end. That would allow direct comparison between the two technologies, an old technology and a new technology, and ultimately give the fisherman still a little bit of security that he's got his line, and ultimately give 50% reduction in entanglement potential for those whales that happen to be swimming in those fishing grounds. So that's where we really want to get started. Get these trial programs, convince National Marine Fisheries to give some experimental fishing permits to these gentlemen, women, to start these trials, and then from our organization, completely support their work, be on their vessels, work the technology, work with Teledyne, keep developing the acoustics, developing the marking, the GPS, all the things that are going to make fisheries move into the 21st century and ultimately remove that vertical line, which is an incredibly serious entanglement risk, especially for large whales, and ultimately the North Atlantic right whale with only 400 remaining.
So that's a lot of education you need to do, right? So it sounds to me like you're really in a grassroots effort to educate not only the legislators, but also the fishermen, make everybody understand the technology, comfortable with the technology. It's really a significant shift in the way you're thinking about lobster fishing.
Yeah, all trap-based fisheries, aquaculture. There's a lot of uses for this methodology because it is very modular, and you can adapt it to different types of fisheries. Aquaculture is moving further offshore. They're getting more pressure for entanglement risk. And they're worrying about this. So butter clams, oysters, it goes on and on and on. In the West Coast, we have salmon fisheries, pens, humpbacks get into those pens. Can we start removing those anchor lines, those vertical lines, hide that stuff down at the bottom? There's always a chance that whales and other marine life can get into that gear on the bottom. But we definitely believe that it's greatly reduced. They literally are swimming like planes, and when those vertical lines are up, it catches certain parts of their body. And just like any creature, you get something that feels, basically like it doesn't belong there, you're going to react. And they roll and they twist and they turn, and then that is on them. And it's a very serious welfare issue to those animals. A lot of them can't break free. A lot of them get trapped, and they basically go through a myopathy where they literally are anchored to their tail and they're held to the seafloor. They can barely get to the surface. And no fisherman wants to do this. I've talked to hundreds of fishermen, and they do not want to do this, but they definitely have a challenge with taking on a brand new technology and a brand new methodology. So that's what we're trying very hard to do, and that's why I formed this as a nonprofit and not a private company in the start, because I knew I was dealing with something that was illegal, and it was going to take all of this grassroots work, convincing the government, fishermen, working with technology partners on, you want to do what? I want to put modems on fishing gear. So it's been a great experience to work with the industry, and I've learned a ton from fishermen, and I think that's one of the things that they're understanding about me. I listen to what they say. So, okay, I get your point. Now let me try to make an adjustment to my technology so that maybe could fit in your day. And it's been great. I've been working. I have a partner fisherman that we're working in Massachusetts. We're getting a lot of work accomplished, and we're discovering great things, and the gear is working wonderfully.
As far as the fishing depths, what kind of depths do you typically lobster fish at?
So inshore fisheries in Massachusetts, most of the fishermen are dealing with 150 feet. Very, very rarely 200 feet or more. The offshore lobster industry in Massachusetts, LMA3, these guys are fishing in much deeper water. They're near the benthic shelf, and they're at 600 feet, 800 feet. And they're the ones that are required to use a much stronger rope, much stronger line, and those 5/8 and 11/16 lines are really detrimental to the whale, especially the right whales. They can't break free of that gear. Inshore fisheries, they have a much better chance of actually maybe getting free and basically self-release, because the gear is generally connected with a 5/16 line or a 3/8 line. And the partners I'm working with, the South Shore Lobster Association, they've invented the whale release rope. So it's basically the Nova braid. It's a breakable rope, and they don't use knots. So they're already leading the way with trying to give a smooth, slippery rope for the whale if they do get entangled. And if we add the ropeless system with a whale release rope, now we've really done something to try to protect those animals. Because if they did get entangled on a ropeless system that was actually actively hauling the gear back, and either inadvertently came up or it got brought up because of redundancies and it was left unattended, could we still have some basically provisions for safety for the whale? And that's the whale release rope. So we're trying to understand every possible way.
Right, and understand what all their challenges are and what the challenges are to the environment, and answer those. Because when I was reading some of the concerns from the fishing community about reducing the amount of rope that they're using, one of the concerns was that as they get into deeper water, it's really going to limit their ability to fish those waters because they're too deep for the amount of rope that's left to them, basically. Yeah. But now the benthos system is able to, quote unquote, reach down that far, correct, to a set of pots that are down on the ocean floor, and that wouldn't be a limit for them in that case.
No, the Smelts lift bag system is very unique because we don't have to manage rope. We don't stick rope in a bag or on a spool or in some kind of trap. So the only thing that we have to do is the old vertical line scope. So what they used to keep from the top to the bottom, now it just lays on the ocean floor and we just lift it up. So we don't have to manage any of that rope in any kind of cage or any kind of system. So we can go in very deep water with the lift bag technology because the acoustics can support that, and because we don't have to try to manage rope in some kind of management system. And that's why it's truly not a mitigated device. This is a new methodology and a new way of thinking about how to fish this type of trap gear.
So your Raft device, does that hook on to their standard pots, or do they have to buy a whole new system?
No, all we do is basically we just connect the lobster raft or the crab raft onto either the single pot or to the trawl. And the gear is so powerful that we can lift the gear directly to the surface. So if you were fishing snow crab pots in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, and those traps could be 500, 600, 700 pounds, we'll just lift those right up, and they're already at the surface for the fishermen. If you're fishing offshore and you're in 800 feet of water and you have 40 traps connected, the lobster raft is a negatively buoyant device, so it basically becomes the anchor for the trawl. And then all we do there is we lift up the scope that they used to have as a vertical line from the bottom back to the surface. The lobster raft comes onto the deck of the boat, and then they haul just the way they've always done.
Have you had a chance to look at the cost analysis of this versus what the fishermen do traditionally? I mean, there's obviously it all comes down to some level of economic impact to the fishermen.
Yes, well, basically, I've decided to stay out of that side of it just because we're trying to discover feasibility, discover if it is possible, and then ultimately, who pays to mark the fisherman's gear? Does the fisherman have to pay for that? Does the government? And ultimately, what I see it as, it's a socio-economic problem. If people want to catch lobster or crab and then go and purchase it as a sustainable fishery at their local restaurant, all of us have to pay a little bit to help save those whales and give the fishermen a technology to be able to do this. So because we're in the discovery phase and this is brand new, it is expensive. We're using technologies that are very, very, very unique to acoustics for climatology studies and oil and gas, dredging, things that, are generally a high cost industry. To make them so we basically can put them on traps and bring that cost down, it's something that I think society has to share the cost in. And ultimately what I've been trying to convince the government is, let's gather pools of money, let's build the gear, let's have some subsidies to where the fishermen can actually work the gear. And it's really no cost to them to begin the use of the technology, especially if we want to reduce 50% of all vertical lines. If we can just put that ropeless system in there. And there's a lot of large NGOs also that, they're trying to raise funds to save these whales. Well, this is a great way to do it. This is innovation. This is the discovery phase. Let's put some money behind that. People ask me all the time, how much does it cost? And I say, well, $1 million. And people are like, oh my God. Because all good ideas in the beginning, it's hard to put a value on them because, and I'm a nonprofit. I'm not trying to build the gear to sell it. I'm trying to solve a problem and give a solution. Hopefully someday that will be allowed. Ropeless fishing is allowed in the country. And then we can start thinking seriously about what that stuff costs and move into that next phase. But that might be a little bit of time for the proof and the discovery. And then how many units can we build to truly bring the price to an affordable rate for fishermen? Fishermen deal with very high technology on their vessels. It's part of their life. You go on any fishing vessel helm and you look, and most people wouldn't know how to turn on half of the devices up there. So it's just another piece of technology that gets added. And I am trying to work to where it's seamless. It becomes part of their chart plotter and sounder. So nothing really changes. We add basically a Teledyne black box that just connects through basically a protocol that allows us to connect into a Garmin, Simrad, Humminbird, chart plotter, whatever the fishermen use, whatever is their preferred. And that becomes a seamless technology. So we're still in the process of developing all this. And I think in a year, maybe 2, we really know better how much this is really going to cost society.
It seems to me that there's some cost savings for the fishermen in the fact that they will not lose as many traps. We won't. You'd spoken earlier about marine debris, right? And the ghost fishing. That's part of lost traps that are littering the floor. So, that should be of some impact to it.
There's a lot of benefits we're discovering to this concept and this methodology. Reducing marine debris, that's a huge one. Plastics are becoming a challenge for our ocean. We want to get everything out of there we can. If there's hundreds or thousands of dollars worth of catch in that gear, we don't want that sitting down at the bottom of the ocean. We want to get that gear up and get the fishermen, bringing that gear to market and to have it as a sustainable catch. Marine steward certifications and things like that are becoming very important. Society wants to know that they're eating seafood that's sustainable. And we saw this, in the 80s with tuna, and it's moving now into salmon, and it's going to move into the crustacean fisheries. And being able to provide the proof, those are incentives for a fisherman. That's where he's getting $1 more a pound or $2 more a pound to maybe ease the technology change and moving into a new methodology. And ultimately, if we lose 5, 10, 15% of our gear every year, that's a direct cost. That is a direct cost that we can remove. And a lot of fishermen, they'll fish their gear for 20 years. So if every year they have to replace 10% of their gear, 5% of their gear, that's a lot of money. That adds up. So trying to reduce the marine debris problem and the ghost fishing using Teledyne benthos, acoustics, and the fail-safes that we've built into the system already to bring that gear back to the surface, even if we have a failure. So that's something that we've really worked hard on, the redundancies and getting the gear off the bottom and getting their catch.
So what does your time horizon look like? How long do you think it will take? And obviously this is a guess, but as you've seen the activity moving forward, how long do you think it'll be before any of this becomes a reality?
It already is becoming a reality. I work the gear almost daily. When I'm not at conferences or basically in my shop, we are on a boat testing the gear. And we're either testing it on our own or testing it directly with fishermen. The North Atlantic right whale doesn't have much time. So if we really want to have a chance to save these animals, the innovation and these possibilities have to be put into place to discover if it's going to work at all. So we can't drag our heels on that. And even if it's just a few pilot programs, that's the beginning of showing that the technology could actually work in the way that we prescribe it. I am hoping that in the next 2 years, National Marine Fisheries allows ropeless fishing, especially in places like Massachusetts where the fishermen are closed out. Give them a chance to get the technology on their boats. Let us work with them. Teledyne, Smelts, any of the other partners that are coming along that want to help this move into basically the 21st century. And I'm hoping within 5 years, we are ropelessly fishing in this country. That's my plan. That's what I'm shooting for. And ultimately bringing these technologies to light and show that there's other benefits. There's ship strike prevention. Fishermen could actually become an advocate to prevent ship strike, where they have this technology down all across the sea floor, up and down the coast. And with Teledyne benthos recorders, we could be listening for whales. We could transmit that information in real time to the shipping industry. There's a lot of benefits to these changes, and there's a lot of potential for money sources to be shared and distributed, so it's not just a burden to a fisherman.
That's an amazing story. Honestly, Richard, I wish you the very best of luck. I think it's in everybody's benefit for you to be successful and for this project to be successful. Thank you very much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Marine Tech Talk podcast. If you'd like to learn more about our technologies, log on to teledynemarine.com, and you can email host Melissa Rossi with your comments or questions about the show at marinetechtalk@teledyne.com. If you like this podcast, please make sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're hearing this show. That way you'll never miss an episode. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next time.